We'll be reading James chapter 4, verses 1 through 10. We'll be reading from the New International Version. What causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? You desire, but you do not have, so you kill. You covet, but you cannot get what you want, so you quarrel and fight. You do not have because you do not ask of God. When you ask, you do not receive because you ask with wrong motives, that you may spend what you get on your pleasures. You adulterous people, don't you know that friendship with the world means enmity with God? Therefore, anyone who chooses to be a friend of the world becomes an enemy of God. Or do you think Scripture says without reason that he jealously longs for the Spirit he has caused to dwell in us? But he gives us more grace. That is why Scripture says God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble. Submit yourselves then to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Come near to God, and he will come near to you. Wash your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Grieve, mourn, and wail. Change your laughter to mourning and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up.
Thanks, Reese, for that reading. Brennan for leading us in those songs of praise and helping us learn a new one to many of us this morning. It is Life Group Sunday, and for those of you who are guests of ours, you may have noticed in the bulletin there's an insert listing all of the life groups and when and where they're meeting today. Please know that you are welcome at any of those groups. Just follow whatever direction finding device you have to those addresses, and follow the menu as well. If it says brown bag it, then just swing by your favorite fast food place and pick something up and take it with you. And I know that you will be welcomed at that home or here at part of our facilities here at Broken Arrow. 2 weeks ago, tomorrow evening, Samantha Cook confessed her faith in Jesus Christ and was immersed into Jesus for the forgiveness of her sins by her uncle David. Samantha, would you stand for just a second, please? You were away last Sunday, and we didn't get to do that, but we're so proud of you, so happy for you in this decision that you've made, and we're praying for you daily. And last Monday evening, thank you, Sammy, Ricky Simpson. Ricky, where'd you go? You what? There's Ricky. You just came back in the door. That was timely. Last Monday evening, Ricky confessed his faith in Jesus and was immersed into Christ by his cousin, Greg Gillan. Melissa and Greg have been studying with Ricky for a while. And Ricky, we're so excited for you and so glad to have you here as a part of our fellowship and rejoice in your salvation as well. Our discussion today from the book of James, which is our Life Group Sunday series, takes us through the first 10 verses of chapter 4. Just to remind you where we were this time last month in the latter part of chapter 3, it was this discussion of James about wisdom, and that there's a distinction between wisdom that comes from God and wisdom that comes from people around us, wisdom that comes from this earth. And when you observe them, you can't help but notice the difference, because he says wisdom is something you can see. Wisdom isn't necessarily something that you hear. It's not necessarily what people say. Wisdom is what people do. And so if you're truly wise, if your wisdom comes from God, then your life is going to look like this. People will be able to see these things in you: purity and peaceableness and gentleness and reasonableness and being full of mercy and being full of good fruits and being unwavering and without hypocrisy in your life. And he gives this beautiful agrarian picture, this farming picture, about those who plant in peace and they harvest this crop of righteousness. And so just imagine a person living their life that way. Then the things that they do and the things that they say, they're sowing seeds, and they're doing so in peace with other people. And the crop that's harvested from that is righteousness. And that's what happens when you sow according to the wisdom of God. He says, now the harvest that you get with the wisdom of the world isn't such a pretty picture. When you see bitterness and when you see jealousy, when you see selfish ambition, when you see disorder, when you see every evil thing, that's the kind of harvest you get when you sow according to the wisdom of the world. And apparently that's what he's seeing among these Christians to whom he's writing here in this letter. that we call the Epistle of James. He sets out the model, the template, the goal, the pattern that they should follow, but apparently that's a stark reality difference from what's actually going on among these predominantly Jewish Christians. We get a snapshot in these opening verses of chapter 4 that's really describing people's lives in the church. And he says, when I look at you, rather than seeing peace and peaceableness and reasonableness, he said, I see all these conflicts and I hear about all these quarrels. And those are softened translations for us, sort of euphemistic translations for us, because the Greek words are actually wars and battles. And so I'm hoping, I'm praying that he's using those terms figuratively. That they weren't physically fighting, that they weren't literally taking up arms against one another and warring and battling. And so that's why our translators want to give them the benefit of the doubt as well. And to say that maybe they're just fighting with their words. Maybe they're just fighting in their attitudes. Maybe they're just fighting in the way they're treating one another and in the way they're not treating one another. And the source of all this warring and battling in this church combat zone was the lusts and the desires that they had within them that were causing tension and conflict and struggle on the inside. And when you have that kind of conflict on the inside, it has to work its way out to the outside. It becomes visible, it becomes noticeable. J.A. Montyer writes that public problems have private causes. And particularly here, he's talking about a disrupted fellowship being the result of a self-pleasing heart. But these public problems that they were having had private causes, private sources. And so he's trying to take this back to the source. He's trying to deal with this on the heart level. And he said, your selfish lust and uncontrolled emotions are so strong and unsatisfied that you're killing one another. You're committing murder. And again, I'm wanting to give them the benefit of the doubt and hope that he's using this figuratively, that he's speaking metaphorically when he says they were murdering one another. It's not that inward lust and desires haven't led to physical murder. We've got too many biblical examples to have us think otherwise, starting with Cain and Abel. Cain's deeds were unrighteous, they were evil. His brothers were righteous, 1 John tells us. His sacrifice, according to Genesis chapter 4, not just his sacrifice, the text actually says that Cain and his sacrifice were not pleasing to God. That was the biggest problem with his sacrifice. It didn't correspond with his life. It didn't correspond with his heart. I'm not convinced that it wasn't just because it wasn't a blood offering. That's not even required within that text. Abel gives of the firstlings of his flock. He gives of the fat portions, and I'm assuming Cain brings rotten vegetables and rotten fruit for his offering. And it's with Cain that God has a problem. The sacrifice is somewhat ancillary there. And so because God does accept Abel and his sacrifice, he's moved to jealousy. He's moved to bitterness, and that's why he kills his brother. So sometimes, yes, it can lead to physical murder. That's what it does with David and Bathsheba and Uriah. Lust in David's heart works its way out into sexual sin with Bathsheba, the result of which pushes him, or he allows himself to be pushed, to the point of murder, sending Uriah to his death. Ahab does the same thing. Actually, his wife Jezebel does the same thing because of a vineyard that Naboth has that Ahab lusts after. He wants that vineyard for a vegetable garden. And so he asks, Naboth, I'll buy it from you. I'll give you a better vineyard, whatever you want. And Naboth says, no, it's my family's inheritance. I'm not interested in trading. When Jezebel finds out why Ahab is so distraught and acting like such a big baby as a king, laying on his bed and pouting and not talking to anybody and not eating, she just hatches this little plan to falsely accuse Naboth of cursing God and cursing the king. Next thing you know, he's stoned to death, and Naboth's got the vineyard. Ahab's got the vineyard. And so, yes, these inward struggles and lust and desires sometimes have led to murder, but I'm hoping that's not what's taking place. I hope the membership wasn't physically dwindling among these Christians because week by week people were dying. I'm assuming there would be some sort of legal prosecution going on here if that were the case. But they were warring with their words. They were using their tongues as deadly weapons. They were ignoring one another to the extent that they might as well have been dead. After they had chewed them out and told them what they thought of them, they just wrote them off and treated them like they were dead. Jesus had some words to say about attitudes in our hearts that lead to quarrels and conflicts that are as distasteful to God as physical murder is. So he says, you've heard that the ancients were told, you shall not commit murder, and those who commit murder will be liable to the court. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother shall be guilty before the court. And whoever says to his brother, you good for nothing, shall be guilty before the Supreme Court. And whoever says, you fool, shall be guilty enough to go into the fiery hell. 1 John 3:15 puts it a little more succinctly. John writes, everyone who hates his brother is a murderer. Everyone who hates his brother is a murderer. And so I'm hoping, as bad as it was, that this is the extent of the murder that was going on among these people, that to kill is used as hyperbole for hatred. And so he says you can't find satisfaction, even in regard to legitimate things that you want. You don't have them because you don't ask. As I've mentioned a couple of times in this series, some people look at James as a commentary on the Sermon on the Mount. And in the Sermon on the Mount, just as we read just a moment ago, Jesus had said, ask and it will be given to you, seek and you'll find, knock and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be opened. And they're not asking, probably because they're too proud to ask. They're too proud to ask one another for the things they need, so they just covet those things and lust after those things and long for those things. They're even too proud to ask for those things from God. It takes humility to ask. And again, that's what the chief shepherd has taught. That's what he exemplified. Paul talks about that in Philippians chapter 2, verses 3 and 4. Do nothing from selfish ambition or empty conceit, but with humility of mind, consider or regard one another as being more important than yourselves. Don't merely look out for your own personal interests, but look out for the interests of others. Apparently, there's not much of that going on among these Christians. And then when they do bother to get around to asking, they don't receive because they've asked with wrong motives, purely selfish motives. They've asked out of a desire to fill their own ungodly lusts. And so he gets to the bottom line of the problem in verse 4 in saying that their acceptance of worldly wisdom has resulted in friendship with the world. And we're going to distinguish what that means and from what that doesn't mean. But basically, it's the attitude that says, my relationship with the world is a very cozy one. It's a very close and intimate one. We're buds, we're besties, we're pals, we're mates, we see eye to eye, we're on the same page. Me and the world, we get one another. We just understand one another. And to have that kind of attitude toward the world puts us at enmity with God. To be that kind of friend of the world makes us an enemy of God. But don't misunderstand what he says or what he means by friendship with the world. He doesn't mean having some callous, disconnected attitude toward the physical world that God created. I think creation care is a much needed concern, very valid concern among God's people. I'm not talking about environmental extremism where we put inanimate things and hold them in greater esteem and of greater value than people created in the image of God. But God put us here as stewards. God put us here to keep and tend this planet. So we can't have a callous attitude toward the creation or to the people of the world. When he says, don't love the world, he doesn't mean the people of the world. It doesn't mean the souls of the world. It doesn't mean your next door neighbor. He doesn't mean the person sitting in the seat next to you this morning. God loved that world. God loved the souls of this world so much that he gave his only begotten Son so that everyone who believed in him wouldn't perish but have everlasting life. Jesus died for the people of this world. Jesus died for me. Jesus died for you. Simon Kistemaker writes that here the world represents the whole system of humanity as organized without God. Everything in this world where there is an absence of God, institutions, structures, values, mores. That's why John can write in 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 and 16, do not love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that's in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the boastful pride of life, is not from the Father, but is from the world. Basically expanding upon what Jesus said again in the Sermon on the Mount, that you can't serve two masters. You're either going to hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to one and despise the other. There's a lot of things in this life where we don't have to make a choice, where we can enjoy the benefits of a both-and scenario, like I hope we're a both-and church, that we're concerned about what God's will is for His people, but we're also concerned about serving the people of our community, that we don't make false dichotomies and back ourselves into corners where we have to make an unnecessary choice between two things that both of which we need to be doing. But when it comes to this one, we've got to decide. We've got to make a choice to either be a friend of the world or a friend of God. And so the relationship with God is supposed to be so intimate and so close that if we choose the world over Him, after having been married to Christ, then it's like spiritual adultery. We're cheating on Christ. We're running around on God. If we have started this relationship with Him, and yet we are so cozy and close and intimate with the world that's around us. He reminds us here in chapter 4 that God seeks us and desires us jealously. And we'll notice in Life Group today a verse that actually says His name is jealous, and He's jealous for His people. James has already told us, though, that jealousy doesn't come from God. Jealousy is a part of the wisdom of this world, so what do we do with that? And we'll have the opportunity in our life groups to talk about the distinction between God's jealousy for His people and the petty jealousies that we sometimes have of one another. God wants us to be friends of His exclusively, and to not run around on Him, to not cheat on Him with this attitude of friendship with the world. I'm grateful that in God's wisdom and in His design, not only did He place us in families, our families of origin where we can be loved and nurtured, and I know some of you weren't blessed with that benefit, and I'm sorry. But others of you, if it wasn't your birth family, it was another family who became that for you to provide love and care and nurture and support and encouragement and direction. So we have the blessing of family, but God also gives us the blessing of friendship in this world. And I hope that's what people find among the body of God's people. A few years ago in Christianity Today, there was an article that was based off of another article that appeared in American Sociological Review. The title of that article in the Sociological Review was Social Isolation in America, Changes in Core Discussion Networks Over 2 Decades. Must have been the most boring article in the world just based on the title. No offense to McPherson, Smith, Lovin, and Brashears who did the research and wrote that article. I'm grateful, however, that this author in Christianity Today took their research and made some application to Christianity. The bottom line was, in this 20-year period from 1985 to 2004, in sociological terms, they saw Americans becoming more and more disconnected from other people. When it came to close friendships, when it came to having a close network of friends, when it came to having some confidant in your life, or more than one confidant with whom you could share your innermost feelings and difficulties and desires. On average, in 1985, over this 20-year study, they found that on average, most people had three others in whom they could confide. 20 years later, it was down to 2. And remember, that's an average because there's a lot of people who say no one. And the percentage of people who said no one increased dramatically over that 20-year period, 1985 to 2004. It increased from 10% to 25%. What that says, brothers and sisters, is that 1 out of every 4 people in our country says they don't have anybody that they can turn to. Nobody that they can go to. No one that they can pour their heart out to. Those that said they had a healthy circle of 4 or 5 friends in that 20-year period declined from 33% to just over 15%. Almost a 50% decline there. I don't think it's just incidental that this lesson fell on Life Group Sunday. I hope that's one of the many needs that our Life Group ministry has helped to facilitate, to help build closer relationships, to forge relationships with people that we might not have known in other contexts within the congregation, sort of a spiritual friends network, if you will. Back in chapter 2, verse 23, Abraham was called the friend of God. What a compliment. And why James can say Abraham was the friend of God is because there's 2 Old Testament texts that call him God's friend. In fact, one of them God is speaking, and he talks about my friend Abraham. So we'll get to talk this afternoon as well about what do you think it was about Abraham that made him God's friend? What would it be in my life that would cause God to say, that's my friend Tim, that's my friend Bruce, that's my friend Teresa? We'll be able to talk about that a little bit this afternoon. And then like he always does, and time's about done. So beginning in verse 7, after he reminds them at the end of verse 6, quoting 2 Old Testament passages that God's opposed to the proud, but he gives grace to the humble, he gives us rapid-fire imperatives, 10 of them. Do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. Starting with submit to God and then resist the devil, and sometimes we get that backwards. You know, we resist God, we submit to the devil. No, you got that backwards. Submit to God, bow to Him, obey Him, surrender your life to Him, and you're going to face temptation, and you got to know, as we also read in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 9, that if you'll just look Him in the eye, stare Him in the face, roll up a paper and smack Him on the nose in the name of Jesus Christ, He'll flee from you. Now, you may not think He will, but if you don't think He will, you don't believe Scripture. Because Scripture says you resist Him and He will flee. Not because of who you are, not because of who I am, because of the one who is in us. Greater is He who is in us than he who is in the world. And so I've gotten very vocal with Satan as I have gotten older and still find myself struggling with temptation. I'm getting tired of it. It's getting on my nerves. That he's still after me. And you can check me into, a facility for evaluation if you want to, but when I'm feeling strong temptation, I talk to him and it's not nice. I call him names. And I know some of you will point to Jude. Well, even Michael the archangel didn't rebuke Satan, but he said, the Lord rebuke you. If God wants to straighten me out on that later, fine, but it's working for me right now. So I'm going to stick with it. Talk to him, tell him to get lost, tell him to get away, tell him to go away, that you serve somebody else. Tell him to leave you alone. And if you want to use the name of the Lord, use the name of the Lord, like Michael the archangel did. The Lord rebuke you. So don't be passive in this thing. Don't be a victim. Don't think, well, I'm undergoing temptation, so what's a guy to do? You stand firm. You resist. You trust God, who says if you resist Him, He'll flee from you. Not that we're ever going to become sinless, but you'll find yourself winning far more battles than you're losing. So draw near to God, submit to God, resist the devil, draw near to God, and He'll draw near to you. We'll get to talk about what that looks like in our life groups this afternoon. Cleanse your hands, you sinners. Purify your hearts, you double-minded. And I'll just go ahead and segue into Psalm 24, verses 3 and 4. Who may ascend into the hill of the Lord? Who may stand in His holy place? He who has clean hands and a pure heart. And we know enough to know that we can't do that ourselves. We don't have anything powerful enough in our possession to cleanse our hands and purify our hearts. That's where we claim the blood of Jesus Christ. And so just to be able to submit to God, just to be able to draw near to Him, to have our hands cleansed and our hearts purified, that has to happen by the blood of Jesus Christ. And through Him, we can become friends of God. We won't read the text. We'll read it in life group. Some verses from John 15. Jesus says, greater love has no one than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. I don't call you slaves anymore. I call you friends. What does that mean? What does it mean to you that you have a friendship, that kind of relationship with Jesus Christ? We'll get to talk about that more today. If you need your spiritual hands cleansed, if you need your spiritual heart purified, we call on you today to accept the promises of God and trust the Word of God and let Jesus do that for you through the power of His blood, just as Samantha has done, just as Ricky has done in the last couple of weeks. If you're struggling with things, if you're trying to resist and it just seems like Satan always has the upper hand in temptation, ask for prayers for strength from your brothers and sisters here. Whatever you need, whatever need you have, our shepherds will be at the front to welcome you, to embrace you, and to assist you. Let's be standing as we sing.